May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be pleasing to you, O God, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. I wonder if many of us right now feel like we are holding maybe 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish and looking out over thousands and thousands and thousands of hungry people. I wonder how many of us, like me, feel overwhelmed by the enormity of the world's suffering right now, by the enormity of the need. And when I look at myself and what little I have to give, I think I probably feel a little like I imagine those disciples felt when Jesus turned to them and said, "You give them something to eat." Helpless, afraid, overwhelmed. And then when I read the beautiful words in Isaiah 55 about an abundant feast, bread and wine free for the taking, abundance for everyone, I immediately end up thinking about the many empty shelves I've heard about in food banks around the country. As hunger has skyrocketed, as those struggling with food insecurity has just gone up and up each year. And I wonder, where is the banquet? Where is this miracle? And then I try to think of it just as a spiritual metaphor. Well, maybe it's about spiritual food and spiritual drink. And then I think of all of those who feel like they're in the midst of a spiritual famine, feeling compassion fatigue and exhaustion as they struggle with things in their own lives and the brokenness of the world around us. But then I think about the tone that Jesus uses in my head when I read this. And I wonder if I've got it a little bit wrong, or all wrong. Because I hear Jesus demanding and chiding and a little bit sharp with his disciples as he turns to them and says, "Well, you feed them." But then I think about the context of this miracle. Just in the verses right before this miracle occurs, John the Baptist is beheaded. Herod is giving an opulent banquet. All of the riches of the empire would have been on display at this party. And there would have been rich food and rich drink and abundance. But does Herod use those riches, that abundance, to feed the hungry? Does he use it like a good shepherd would to give to the people he governs and to care for their needs? No. He saves it only for those who are rich and powerful and important and already well-fed. And then right in the midst of this party, he beheads John and brings that bloodthirstiness right into the midst of the banquet. This is the epitome of how the kingdoms of the world work. Taking abundance, taking riches, and using them not to feed those who need it the most, not to care for those who need it the most, not to care for everyone, but rather to care for those who already have much. To use it to shed blood, to use it to deny truth, as Herod did, angry as he was at John the Baptist, speaking truth to him over and over again. And Jesus has just heard this news. He has just heard of this violence. But rather than responding to violence with violence, he retreats to a deserted place, maybe to grieve, maybe in order to protect himself and his disciples from further violence by Herod. We don't really know why. But as Jesus goes, the crowds hear about it. And before he can have even a moment to himself, thousands and thousands of those with needs, those who are sick, those who are hungry, arrive before him. And whatever Jesus is feeling, perhaps grief, perhaps fear, perhaps anger, is replaced by something else. The text says he feels compassion. Literally, the words that are used, that he is moved in the depths of his being, in his guts, by the pain of the crowds. And so he responds to this violence, to his grief, with compassion and by caring for those who have come to find him. And he heals the sick, performs miracle after miracle after miracle, all day long until the day is finally gone, and the disciples come to him and say, "Can you please send them away so they can go get something to eat?" And I wonder if the compassion that Jesus is feeling for the crowds is also what he feels for his disciples. As he looks at them, exhausted as I'm sure they are, terrified as they must be too at this news about John the Baptist's violent death, and looks at them and gently prods them not to live in the midst of their exhaustion and their fear, but instead to go into their very depths and find compassion as Jesus has modeled, and to give what they have. And when they can only produce 5 loaves and 2 fish, Jesus does not chide them. Jesus is not angry or belittling. He takes it, and he blesses it, and he breaks it, and he gives it, and he feeds. And with the disciples, he feeds everyone who needs it. Not just the important or the powerful or those who said the right things or believed the right things. He fed everyone. Jesus' banquet is in direct contrast to the banquet that Herod has put on. And it's interesting too. I think I often hear when I feel overwhelmed by those words, "You give them something to eat." I assume Jesus is saying, "You perform the miracle." But Jesus doesn't ask a miracle from his disciples. He simply asks for what they have. And when they give it, he ensures that it is not just enough, but it is more than enough. And presumably Jesus could have done this all on his own. He didn't need the disciples' 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. He's been healing people all day, performing miracles. He could have produced a feast all on his own. But instead, he invites the disciples into this miracle. He invites them to bring themselves and what little they have, and then he makes it a banquet. He collaborates with them. And that is also at the heart of Christ's kingdom, collaboration. God working with us, you and I working together, and not being expected to produce a miracle, me or you, but rather bringing what we have, whether it is our 5 loaves and 2 fish, or our 50 loaves and 50 fish, or our crumb of bread, whatever it is, bringing it, all of us, together with Christ at our center. I recently read a pastoral letter by David A. Steele, who is a leader in the Brethren Church. He was writing in response to the end of TPS for Haitians and responding both to those in his congregations who are Haitian and those who are not. And he urges care for the Haitians, prayer, support, concrete support, advocacy. And then he goes on to say, while the church cannot remove every burden, we can ensure that nobody bears those burdens alone. I cannot produce miracles. I assume none of you can produce miracles. If you can, please let me know. I've got some things I'd like fixed. But we can come together and bear one another's burdens and bear the burdens of the world. And beyond that, we know we are not in this alone. We are not asked to be the miracle workers. But Christ, who is at our center, is a miracle worker. When we see hatred, when we see violence, when we see the world around us responding in ways that are so ugly We are invited to follow Christ, not to respond with hatred or with violence, but instead to reach into the depths of our beings and find our compassion, knowing that Christ's compassion for us and for our world goes so much deeper than ours or what we can even imagine. And then we are invited to bring our 5 loaves and our 2 fish, and all of us to come together, knowing that it is Christ who calls us, and it is Christ who will hold those things, Christ who will bless them, Christ who will break them, Christ who will hand them back to us to feed us and then to help us feed the world. We can come together, you and me, with Christ at our center, and then that banquet I have been longing for, that banquet the world is longing for, suddenly becomes possible. Because of our crumbs, because of our bread, because of our scarcity, because of our abundance, altogether, we can feed on rich food, and we can feed our world with rich food. Amen.